Okay, we are recording.
We need Joey back.
Yeah, we do. I'll pause for a sec.
Y'all can get back into her,
We're into it. So we're back on recording, and we were talking about the craters in the road were so huge that our driver would have to swerve all the way to the other side of the road just to avoid these craters, and yet somehow diamonds were being dug all around, and people were just not benefiting. So that is incredible. But that's some of the Chinese colonialism that's going on now. So there's some of the current, benefactors of colonialism. And it's disappointing that it's still going on to this day.
To be honest, the Chinese are using Africa like we used China in the last 3 decades.
Uh-huh.
They're using it as a resource and labor pool type of thing, and it's not. You would figure that somebody that was victim to that sort of predatory behavior would be better, more resilient against it, but
that's not the story.
Yeah, the Chinese government, I make no excuses for. I think that they are very bad news.
Well, people used to frequent the body, what was it, the body exhibit or whatever, and that was supposedly like Chinese dissidents.
Oh wow!
Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember what you're talking about, and I didn't realize they were Chinese dissidents.
Yeah, I mean the fact that they were real bodies should have already been.
Should have been questionable.
Yeah.
But I will tell you one African nation that has impressed me to no end is Ethiopia.
Okay.
Ethiopia has basically its own sources of water, even though it's landlocked.
Okay.
And its economic output is really amazing at this point. Okay. And they might be Africa's new superpower in the next coming century. I read a report. I had a report on my Facebook from Caspian Reports, which I highly respect. Their geopolitical articles, and they talked about it, and I was very impressed by their outlining. Not only do they have sources of water and other minerals. Not that water's a mineral, but other valuable resources within Ethiopia, and Ethiopia has been a country for nearly 3,000 years.
Okay.
So, like a generic group, they are considered a tribal structure. So they have a lot of intertribal politics going on. Mm-hmm. But the leadership in Ethiopia has done well to incorporate the more minor tribes into the power structure for representation. Which has turned out like gangbusters, because when everybody has a piece of the pie, everybody wants to do better in that pie.
Yep, a piece of the pie is certainly important, for real.
I mean, it's unfortunate because you end up thinking that that's the kind of thing that can be open to exploitation very, very easily. Like there's just so many examples of Western corporations just exploiting the resources of developing countries, and it makes me worry that that they're going to get their hands on the water there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the leadership is wise, though. They're not giving away the farm just because somebody gives them a Mercedes.
Right.
The leadership of Ethiopia is pretty significantly progressive for Ethiopians. I wouldn't say in our terms, but they realize the wisdom of developing their actual nationhood into something more modern and something more developed for themselves.
They realize what it's worth.
Yeah, and they're projecting their power in their neighboring countries. So they're actually acting like a counter to China, to U.S. interests, to European interests. So I would say keep an eye on Ethiopia for the next few years. It might be something amazing coming out of there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
what up,
So
really
Katie?
incredible.
you're ultimately on some level saying that some type of warfare is in their future.
Well, conflict is inevitable in our current in our because in order for the United States to drop a level, somebody's got to try and raise up themselves for a level, and I always say this: conflict is probably the most inevitable thing that we have in our future. But I think honestly, I think it's going to be over water resources more than oil or anything else in the future.
Wait, so were you saying conflict, or we're looking out for them as just being a rising power?
They're going to be a rising power regardless of what happens with the U.S. interests in the area. I definitely feel that Ethiopia is on the right track, and they're developing everything in the classical sense of developmental economics, which is what Maynard Keynes taught and exemplified, and we that was the strongest point in our economic future was at that point. We were also taxing the very wealthiest 90% at the time. I like to say that to scare the near do wells in the audience.
Yeah, I think you sort of touched on an interesting point about Ethiopia also and their potential to sort of be independent of both the U.S. and China, because that almost reminds me sort of like the non-aligned movement in the Cold War that tried to have independence from both NATO and from the Eastern Bloc.
Yes, yes, and unfortunately, both superpowers work to diminish those countries wanting to join the non-aligned movement. But America could have played that card better. To be honest, they could have accepted them and just made sure that they were strong enough to be independent of Russia's influence. And that would have been a victory in and of itself, because it creates another power structure that is interested in their own self-interest, but is not interested in these global super politics, these
Yeah, but
geopolitical super politics.
the problem is with that, because it makes sense, but we're capitalists and we want to cut.
Yes, yes,
and,
yes.
and,
You're
and we,
you're
we
absolutely
want a
right.
we want a guarantee on a cut, and if you don't give it to us, we'll ingrain ourselves somehow, some way, politically. We'll do something. We'll create unrest. We will do something in order to indebt you to us.
I mean, that's why, yeah, like what Raul
We
said
want to cut.
was totally smart, and that's why when people talk about U.S. interests or just the interests of any country in foreign policy, they wrongly conflate what would actually rationally be in that country's interests with the interest of a handful of corporations. Because yeah, it would have been a lot smarter for the U.S. to develop the non-aligned movement like in the 50s to turn Guatemala into a potential ally, but instead they had United Fruit come in there and basically launch a coup, or the CIA launched one on behalf of United
Right,
Fruit.
right. Exactly.
Just,
You're speaking into exactly what I'm speaking to, Joey.
yeah, definitely.
As a person that suffered from U.S. interests in their country, I definitely understand Joey's point and your point, Ish. But and how you doing, KD? We didn't say hello to you, brother.
I'm doing pretty good. How about you guys?
Pretty good.
Pretty good, pretty good. Just talking about Ethiopia and its possible rise in the future in as a superpower, as a maybe not as a global superpower, but as a regional superpower for sure. Because
I can
global
agree with that.
superpower takes too much out of your economy, and I'm beginning to not want. I'm beginning to switch my ideals a little bit in terms of the term global superpower, because unfortunately what happens is that you guarantee your fall out of economic prosperity by engaging in military adventurism.
It's interesting that when you mention global superpower, it's rare that I mean, how many African countries, right, can we call global superpowers? And we're talking about Africa.
Yeah. That's why I'm interested in seeing Ethiopia, and I might invest in Ethiopia myself because
I mean, when you look at Africa, right, you're talking about an abundance of resources.
abundance,
You're talking about
like
the
there's nowhere
largest
else in the world.
continent. Right. Well,
Nowhere
maybe
else
South
in the world.
America. Maybe South America. But you're talking about the largest continent, the most countries, no superpowers.
Yeah, it's
Wealth of
insane.
resources, no superpowers. You know what I mean? Like no superpower, and obviously it's you're talking about centuries and centuries of colonialism. You guys already
Yes.
mentioned colonialism, which certainly somebody benefits, right? There are countries that are superpowers because of how they been, well, at least in part because of the benefit they receive from colonialism in Africa. But man, it's just
That's why they
interesting.
say taking out someone like Muammar Gaddafi was essential because he was trying to build power. And
Mubarak.
Go ahead.
Mubarak,
The Egyptian leader.
the Egyptian leader.
Yeah.
Like, we let him go down, and he was, quote, on our side, unquote, our ally, quote, unquote.
And how did we let him go down?
Oh,
when they had that uprising on Facebook,
Yeah.
and overthrew him,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Now
and he called for help.
Yeah,
Okay.
He did. Now, I'm never going to be against taking down a dictator, even Omar Gaddafi, because I've lived under a dictator, and like I said, they're all the same. They're all the same.
Sure.
And I understand the need for Africans to rise up in the world, but that's why I want to support smart policy
Right.
and smart decisions, with my investing dollar.
Well, speaking of which, you were, talking about different countries. I mean, Ghana in the past has been famous for having like the most uncorruptible leaders. I forget which iteration that was of prime minister. I don't know if it was like around 2007ish or so, but it might have been Kwame Nkrumah. But whoever it was, he was famous as being considered like one of the most non-corruptible like leaders, in the history of like that region.
Ghana is definitely one to watch. I would also say that Liberia, because of its progressive policies in terms of leadership, they had a bunch of women move into the government basically in mass, and the government suddenly got much better. It's like mother had. When somebody talks about what a woman's place is, my mother always says it's in control.
And I would agree. And I want to say, and this is a segue, but I would agree. This is something that me and my wife have discussed. In the early 2000s, I paid attention to a study, and this study said that, and I know it's going to make a lot of people mad if you're in that elitist group. Well, if you are, you probably shouldn't be listening to this show anyway. But this study found that women in executive class positions that are allowed to work from home are more efficient, and in most cases companies run better with women in those positions and allow them to do that. And it kind of speaks to what you're saying. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other in leadership positions. I'm saying that their hand is necessary.
Oh, absolutely. And I think
it's just necessary.
I think it's partially because of how we're raised. Women are raised with social games. Men are raised in competitive games, right? So we always look at each other.
This is similar to some conversations I was having earlier. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So women play house. Women, and I hate to enforce gender roles. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying that the majority of females in this country have been raised to socialize on a whole other level that men can only aspire to with lots of work later on.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like with tasks, right? Me and my wife often talk about it, like the way men are wired versus the way women are wired. Like if me and my wife are both working on a project in the house, and we both get to the ends, we both get the job done, right? but the way that I go about it and the way that she goes about it is going to be completely different. So while we do it together, we're not doing it together because, and I, you know, we talk about this all the time. I'm like, women have a way of multitasking, so they can focus on 4 or 5 different things where guys are singularly motivated, right? Like we're going to be fixing the porch, and then we're gonna go work on the car, and then we're gonna, you understand what I'm saying? Whereas, you know, a woman may be juggling several different things and doing it efficiently. You understand what I'm saying? And it's just because of the way we're wired.
Not only that ish, but the future is multitasking. The future is not ours. I always say that. I love that shirt that I see some feminists wear called "The Future is Female" because it's true. The future is lots of things coming at you at once, and if you're not ready for it, it's gonna stomp on you bad. And our single focus task is great to get certain things done, but certain other things we're definitely at a disadvantage to our women.
I'm glad that this particular segue came up because Flavius Maximus was gaslighting today, and he definitely needs to be educated on how you know the importance of women.
Flavius, you gonna take that? You gonna take that silently?
I don't
fight
know
back,
if you,
brother.
I don't know if you saw my.
I just saw your peace sign. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw my broken peace sign, but it's there.
Oh, you gave me my portion of peace.
Where do
you kept yours and you gave me mine? Huh?
Yeah, let me ask you a question. When you're in dark mode, you can't see us. Like, what's going on there?
Well, when I'm on my phone, I can only see the person who's talking.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So you didn't see my piece. You didn't see my piece.
I saw you give me my. I understood that you gave me my portion of peace.
He felt it in the force. He felt it in the force.
I would have to talk to you and give you the peace sign at the same time for you to see it. That's what you're saying.
But I understood what was going on because I do it all the time. I'll throw up the peace sign and I'll put my index finger down and let them know that I'm retaining this half of peace, and you can have the one that's remaining.
It's really a sign of pieces.
Yeah.
Right. Pieces of peace.
Pieces of peace.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so why do you think the future is multitasking?
Because everything comes at us at a quicker technology. What it allows is quicker communication and more levels of communication. So like we're talking now, and I'm talking to people on Facebook right now, and I'm talking to people on Discord, which is a gaming talking site, kind of a program.
Does that allow you to be fully present here when you're
that's
having
the
other
question, because men are typically single focused animals because we were hunters,
which is what I was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm not good at any of these things. Multitasking is not my thing. But so I'm fully admitting that the future is not mine by
no, practice makes perfect.
That's true. That's true.
We are
and I welcome our new overlords because we fucked up the planet already.
But my question is, do we want to live in a society? Do we want to live in a society where we have to focus on multiple things at once? Like, in other words, if women are doing this out of a necessity, is that something that we want to be doing all the time? Like, you know, yeah.
I think I think transitions like that usually are seamless. You know, before you know it, you're just living in it and you've adapted to it. I think things like that are just kind of seamless transitions, kind of like how we moved into the information age.
Yeah, okay. I would give the example, Ish, that the cell phone revolution in the way we communicate and act with each other, and it was bumpy at first. I remember when cell phones first came out, and people I don't need this. I have my. If you remember that, boys.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny considering now, but the transition was seamless.
Well, okay, so here's the question I'm really trying to ask is, if we're building the sort of world that we actually want to live in, and we're not just moving into a world incidentally, is this the kind of world that we want to move into? In other words, myself included, and a lot of folks nowadays have so much problem paying attention. We can't even focus on the movie that we're watching. We have to be on Facebook and all this other stuff at the same time. We're not fully invested in the movie or fully enjoying it or fully suspending our disbelief and getting into this movie because we're distracted, because our attention spans have been shrunk to the point where, you know, we can't even watch a movie. And it's like back in the days, are you kidding me? Like TV was for people with short attention spans, and it's shrinking at such an incredible rate that, like, you know, maybe it's not good to have to multitask. Maybe that's something we do out of necessity, not out of you know, what we're actually intending to do.
But I would say it's a lot like martial arts. If you want to get good at something, go do it. You're not gonna something about this story reminds me that we can't be complacent and think everything's going to come to us.
That's not
just naturally.
We're totally. You're totally misreading.
Am I off? Am I off? Okay.
You're totally misreading what I'm saying. You're talking to me about practice and go practice. I'm telling you, or I'm asking you, is this something that we want to be practicing in the first place?
I understand.
Right? So yeah, so I'm not saying, oh my God, how am I going to do this? It's so hard. I'm saying, is this where we want society to head towards? Or do we want to live in a society that's maybe more chill, more able to focus? Imagine a society where you're hanging out with your kids. You don't have to be looking at your phone. You don't have telephones ringing in the background. You don't have all this stuff going. You're totally immersed in the moment, giving all of your attention to your kids in that block of time you have to your kids. And then later on, you can go do some other things that you want to do, and you get to focus on something like that. Imagine if we're giving our attention fully to our tasks, and that we're intentional in doing that, and that we're
that's the key. I think is you're saying it's intentional, and that's where I agree. I agree with you heavily. That but somehow I feel that we have to be responsible for our futures. Like if that's not something that you want, like what you just described, then describe to me a future that you do want and work towards it.
Yeah, the one I just described. Yeah, the one where you get.
No. I'm not. I'm saying anybody. I'm not saying
right.
In particular player.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we become victims of circumstance, and we move in a way that's not intentional. You know.
I agree.
I mean, at work, you know, maybe you join a union, or maybe you push the culture at work. I'm fortunate enough to have a job where it's pretty progressive, and there's always talk, even from the top down, of how we want to do things and how we want to change things. And people are starting to push back against these crazy hours that folks in the political realm are expected to work and all of that. And we're trying to change the whole culture, and it takes a lot of intentionality.
Yes,
and if we
I
just
agree.
sit back and say, oh, hopefully one day, but in the meantime, we're going to keep practicing doing what we're doing, we'll never get there. But
Absolutely.
if we know how to do what we're doing, but we keep saying, no, I've been working 7-day weeks for the past 8 weeks. Now I want a couple weeks off, and I don't even want that to come off of my allotted vacation. I want that to be extra time I get to take off, since I had all this overtime I put in that, of course, I can't get paid for because I'm on salary, and, you know, it's not considered overtime. And because I was putting in back-to-back hours, and because I'm a human and we should get time off, and maybe this whole way of working campaigns is kind of toxic, and we don't.
I agree, but that's a whole other subject.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. That's the intent. That's the intentionality that we're kind of working towards.
Yes.
Right, and we're chipping away at it. So, you know, even if you do have to work those crazy hours, maybe they'll still, you know, I've had bosses say take some time off and actually calculate the days. Oh, you worked this many 7-day weeks? Okay, then let's see how many days you'll take off. Or maybe they said, well, we wanted you for at least the 6 days. That's what you signed up for. Let's calculate how many 7-day weeks you worked and give you those days off, or however. But at least that's like,
be equitable with your time.
yeah, exactly. So it's like giving back in a
Yeah.
sense. But this is something if you fight for, you might be able to get it. But if you just relent and say that's the way it is, then you're never gonna get that.
I agree, but as the person that ran the campaigns as well, I was the person that worked the hardest, and I made sure that was the case.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, though, right? Because I can tell you the people that work the hardest are the bosses, and this becomes the whole culture. It's from the top down. Since the boss does it, he expects you to do it. As the mid-level manager, you expect the next person to do it. But
yeah, I understand.
What if we treat people the way we fight for other people to be treated? You know how many people worked for us that were going door to door fighting for a $15 an hour minimum wage, and they weren't even making $15 an hour? Right? That's ridiculous. It's hypocrisy. So we have to fight back against that kind of stuff, or
I understand. I did not do it myself because I was too busy on other people's causes.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying and agree.
Yeah. But it's what we allow in this type of industry, because we're fighting for something good, and working hard is just, it's
part of the
just
course.
What we're used to.
Part of the course.
But it's like, all right, you can work hard, but you can still fight for, something more equitable, like a fair work week. I push back against, extra hours being thrown out and expected to be worked at the last minute. And I'm like, whoa, I spent days and days and days going from business to business, showing fast food workers how they're no longer going to have crazy hours thrown at them. They're going to have a fair work week schedule. But now the same thing, I'm not being treated the same way, right? That's like hypocrisy. That's what we fight back against. I'm not saying it always works, but at least we can fight to change, the culture.
No, I agree. And I think that in my particular case, I was so busy with other people's causes, I didn't think to stop for my own.
Oh yeah, that's how they get you. That's how
it's
they get all
true.
of us.
I totally into it. You're right. But I did a lot of good for the time I put in, and I never pushed the people under me as hard as I pushed myself. But that's just a personal foible.
Sure.
What cause are you talking about, Raul? What do you consider your own cause to be?
That's a good question. My cause to be center-left, progressive cause that still engages with capitalism. But the important thing to me about working in politics, that you telling every single person that I meet that they have the power to change anything they want about society they live in, because that's the promise that we make our citizens, that the voting actually matters. And if it doesn't matter, and if it's a big game, which I've heard many times over my years, I never believed it, because if it was a big game, why do both parties want less voters on the rolls?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's the way to change things, and the voting. And I've never ascribed third parties as bad, but honestly, the one thing I'll tell you about third parties, working with them over the years, they seem the little things that they need to do in order to take the big things, the big steps. They need state senators, they need state congressmen, they need state representatives. They need smaller steps, focus all their efforts there in order to build power, to get their influence felt on society. And they can say, look, we changed the culture in Seattle, we changed the culture in, we changed this, we did this. And I'm talking about in general too. I'm not even talking about a particular party. The libertarians could do it as easily as the Greens.
Acting locally, you mean?
Acting locally to affect larger change, which I've always said, which I understand that this is not part and parcel, but it bothers me so much that, want to support third parties, but the third parties themselves seem almost like they're trying to say that they're entitled to the same representation. The contest, you're not entitled to anything. That's what I've told them, to the leaders, to their faces.
I mean,
And
I think there's truth to that. But my critique of third parties also has to do with the fact that I think there are certain people who just fetishize them and who don't have a real sort of pragmatic understanding of the way the American system operates. Like, I see people on the left who will badmouth Bernie Sanders, badmouth AOC, and anyone who supports them, and just says, why are you wasting your time running as Democrats? You're never going to win. And that's just so self-defeating. I mean, look at New York State. We've elected a ton of left-wing DSA people to the state legislature, Democrats, and we have had an absolutely positive effect. People who don't take into account the electoral system and just like fetishize the idea of never running as a Democrat are never going to achieve anything. I mean, they are a lot of times just going to act as spoilers, and I feel like certain people on the left who are just against electoralism don't actually want to change. They just want to be a subculture, and I would be in favor, because to me the party itself matters less than the agenda that we get passed. So if we lived in a system that made it easier for third parties, I would be all for breaking with the Democrats, but but because we don't, I'm not, and the results are kind of in. I mean, yeah, you can just compare like the vanity bids of like a celebrity figure like Ralph Nader to actually doing the hard work like DSA did in the past 2 election cycles of electing candidates to the state legislature, and now actually successfully knocking off a whole batch of incumbent Democrats in Congress as well.
But to get back to the point that you asked me, the important thing I think about elections is that they hand over power to the average citizen. Good, bad. I've heard many people hate on that idea, but they're actually acting like Alexander Hamilton's, that they don't trust the electorate. I have a different idea. I would like to see more and more voting and make it easier, not harder, because then we'll get more representatives that feel like the United States population, instead of like a small elite group that votes in their elite interests. And for me, it was particularly important, coming from a country that outlawed free elections, to enforce the idea, not enforce the idea, that's a bad word, to push the idea that people actually do matter. And that to me actually matters to me. That's what I worked for, what I pushed for. Now, the different things, like I said the other day, I worked for economic candidates mostly. And the reason is that I think that affects the most people. Not that the issue, but that covers such a huge swath of people, including the very wealthy. I'm not opposed to people having wealth, because I just think it's normal in the system that we have. Maybe one day in the far future, oh my God, we're already at meeting time. Oh no.
Don't worry, you still have time to finish your thought up.
Yeah. So my work was to ensure that people had candidates that they could believe in, and they could see the work that's being done for them, and that they elected them, not anybody else. They personally elected these people into office that actually made a change in their lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think we do need to have, economic issues, bread and butter issues, be the central unifying issues. I mean, it's kind of weird to me how like the Democratic Party has drifted more towards being a socially liberal party at all level, but a big tent on economic issues. And it seems to me it should actually be the other way around. Like, you know, I would rather have like a candidate running in the South or running in the Midwest who maybe was more conservative than I was on, say, abortion, but supported single-payer healthcare than what we have now, which is candidates who are pro-choice yet support the status quo on healthcare and receive contributions from defense contractors, or, you know, even like, I mean, and obviously I don't want to diminish the importance of a woman's right to choose. It's absolutely important, but I think that the problem with Democrats is they've sort of gotten to the point where they lead off with culture war issues or with social issues that may be some of the less popular parts of their agenda. I mean, Republicans have always had parts of their agenda that are widely unpopular with the public, but they just don't lead off with that. They don't lead off with wanting to deregulate Wall Street, because if they did, they would lose in a landslide every time, whereas Democrats lead off with the culture war stuff that's oftentimes very divisive, when they should be leading off with, and yeah, we may disagree. I mean, I'm obviously further left than you, so we may disagree on what those bread and butter issues are, but I think we do agree that, that like basically meat and potato issues, trying to say you can do what's best to give people a better standard of living, those are the winning issues.
Hey, if I can jump in before we end, that hasn't really been my experience. I haven't worked on a lot of campaigns on the left where our big thing that we were touting was our candidate's pro-choice, right? It's like, if anything, that's standard. And that's like, if they found out that they weren't, that would be an issue. But it usually is like, it's usually boring. It's like usually the boring litany of normal stuff like jobs, education, and, you know, like a third thing. It's always like the same 3 big tent things that anyone could say from either side, you know?